Hi. I don't know if you can hear me. If somebody's there, let me know if you can hear me. Nobody's there. This is Tamara Rubin, Lead Safe Mama, and I think I'm doing a live video chat in the lead group. That's what I'm trying to do. Um, and I'm waiting for people to chat and ask questions. The idea is that people could ask questions. But, oh, people are watching. Hello, people. Can someone type a question for me so I can see what the question is to see if the function's working? I would really appreciate that. Plus, I need to buzz out for a minute because I asked my kiddo to plug in my computer and he did not do that. So give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm back. All right, testing. Katie Nelson. Hi, Katie. Plugging my computer in. Does anybody have a question? I'm here just to answer questions today. It's kind of a new idea. I have a couple of new ideas. One of them I have not managed to get off the ground yet, and that is doing interviews with various people, including members of the group. Come on, guys, ask me a question. I only gave you about 12 hours notice on this one, so I understand if nobody has any questions. Let's see, what can I talk about? Well, things I'm going to be reporting on the blog very shortly. I've got stuff I'm going through from December. This is a Christmas mug. Yay. And I'm finally getting to those things. I'm getting to things. Let's see. Here's a question. We live in a historic house with many leaded glass windows. Someone told me that the sun going through them can cause issues, but that seemed far-fetched. Is that true? Well, so we have a leaded glass window here in our house. They cause dust. They generate dust. They exude dust from the lead lines. The dust isn't coming off the glass necessarily. It's coming off the lead lines. And so sun causes deterioration and wear. So not like, oh, sunshine causes lead dust, but, long-term exposure to the sun causes deterioration and wear and can cause an increase in lead dust. And so, yes, if you have a functional or non-functional, like non-movable leaded glass, stained glass window with lead lines, it can definitely cause a lead dust hazard. I think I've worked with 3 families specifically whose children have been poisoned as a result of leaded glass windows. One was a family in Washington, D.C., and they had bought a very expensive condo in a renovated church, and they bought the unit that had the giant window, and that window shed enough lead dust to poison their kiddo. Another family had a bank of bay windows where I believe the windows themselves were clear glass, but then the leaded glass windows, the lead lights at the top were there, and then there was a bench underneath it that was a cushion. It was a custom-made cushion, so it didn't move. Maybe it had been there from the previous owners. And the lead dust had permeated the cushion and was the likely cause of exposure to the child in that home. In our home, what we did was we hired a contractor, a fine finish contractor, to put a plate of, I forget what you call it, but it's the kind of glass you can throw a baseball at. So like a tempered glass panel in front of it. So, and then seal that in with caulk and a new wood trim. And so that window is in our house, but there's no way you can access it unless you break the glass in front of it. So it's not generating a lead dust hazard and it's fully sealed in. Hi, Consuelo. Consuelo says, how nice to see you. Yay. How safe is it to use a pencil? My kids use pencils every day, but pencils are lead free. They call it pencil lead. And actually, historically, pencils, as we know them, have never had lead in them. They have been previously painted with lead paint, like old pencils. The decorative paint on the outside has been lead, very old pencils, but the wood wrapped around graphite is a pencil, and the new ones are not painted with lead paint. And I think possibly in response to a lot of recalls for lead painted pencils, even as long ago as the 1990s, prior to the CPSC regulations coming into play, pencils started being wrapped in paper. So we got like Pokemon pencils for our kids. And the Pokemon decoration is on a paper that's wrapping the exterior of the pencil, and so that was a way to avoid lead paint. And like Ticonderoga pencils, other pencils are not painted with lead paint. But if you happen to have really old pencils hanging around and they're not Ticonderoga, there's a possibility that they're painted with lead paint. So it's a good idea to refresh your pencils every couple of years anyway. Hello from Deutschland. Hello, Kimberly. My cousin's in Berlin, and she just had a baby there, and I have to send her baby presents. And let's see, what can I tell you about Germany? Well, I was in Germany 4 years ago, briefly. We went to Hamburg on our way between Amsterdam and Denmark. And I wasn't there long enough to notice any lead hazards. But there were lots of lead hazards in Amsterdam, and there were lots of lead hazards in Denmark, which is kind of interesting because people seem to think that the lead paint problem over there was solved, and well, or before, or better than our solution. And that's simply not the case. When they banned lead paint in Europe, the lead paint banned at a higher level of lead. So my understanding, and I'm just riffing here, but what I recall is that the level of lead in paint that was banned in Europe was anything over 20,000 parts per million. So the lead paint ban still allowed high lead paint, whereas the lead paint ban in America, which came much later, had a level of 600 parts per million. So lead paint in Europe is still quite a huge problem. I had when I went to Amsterdam, I brought lead check swabs with me, and I tested the paint on the fence for a playground, and it was bright red right away, lead paint. So definitely a problem. Any other questions? Let's see. Oh, we got some more questions. Linda, what causes lead dust to be released from the lead lines of the leaded glass, presuming it's not bumped or otherwise disturbed? The lead dust comes off of the lead lines just through deterioration. As anything gets old, it deteriorates. The lead in leaded glass windows is generally not sealed. If it is sealed with some kind of urethane or other covering, you see a yellowing, and that ends up chipping and peeling anyway. It's just a volatile substance. It's usually almost 100% lead, raw lead, and that sheds dust. And actually, that was considered to be a selling point of lead paint back in the 10s and 20s and 30s, and that's mentioned in my film. If you haven't seen my film yet, lead paint was sold with the selling point of, well, it creates dust, it sheds dust all the time, so if your baby puts their hand on the wall and makes a handprint, you could wipe that right off because there's a fresh layer of paint underneath the surface because it's constantly exuding dust. That's just something that's the nature of lead. It's not like gold. Even gold is like bound with other metals like copper when you have it in jewelry, but it's not like other metals where they don't tend to shed dust. It really clearly and obviously does shed dust, and that's a really unique property of lead, which again the lead industry thought was a good opportunity to market it, a marketing opportunity. Hello, Meredith from Kansas. Hello, Kimberly. Let's see. We just moved here and stayed in an Airbnb in Amsterdam. Yeah, in Amsterdam. The cool thing about Amsterdam when we were there, which we loved, and we went because we thought about moving there, and there are issues there. I belong to a couple of Facebook groups like Amsterdam Mamas and Amsterdam Moms with Kids with Disabilities and stuff like that, because we still think about moving there because my husband is a bike advocate and activist and builder and inventor, and we've had mostly a car-free life the entire 18 years we've been here in Portland. We just got this little car for my business, but we mostly haven't had a car. And what I noticed about Amsterdam is because real estate is so dense and so scarce and so old, all of it's been really well renovated on the inside. At least all of the interiors that I went into didn't seem to have lead paint hazards. But in the countryside in Denmark, away from the density of the city where renovation is required to keep the things stable, the interior of most of the buildings had lead paint hazards. Let's see. Kimberly said, wow, but I'm not sure what because I'm not following these exactly in real time. Let's see. Meredith, said, "You ruined my dreams of having an old farm Victorian house. A little bitter, but deeply thankful." You're welcome. I mean, I gotta say, I live in a 1905 house, and I moved here after my kids were poisoned because I thought this house was going to be safe, and it had been fully renovated, or so I thought. I didn't realize the wood trim had lead. I didn't realize there was lead dust from previous renovations in the um, circulating the air conditioning, not air conditioning, the heating system, the forced air system. I didn't realize there was dust in the grain, in the pitting of the concrete in the garage and the basement that had lead. And so my son, who was born after my kids were poisoned, ended up being poisoned in the house that we live in. And then we had to do a whole bunch more work. And we got the grant from the city. They did about, I think, $17,000 worth of work to fix those hazards I just mentioned. They replaced our front door. They sealed our basement. They sealed our garage floor, and they did a few other things. But when we moved in here, I knew what I knew, which was what I knew 13 years ago. And I knew that lead paint hazards were primarily in windows, so I knew to test the windows, and the windows were high lead. So before we moved in, I replaced all the windows. Before we moved in, I did a whole bunch of other stuff. We spent about $40,000 before we moved in to make sure it was lead safe or lead free. But then there were all these things that were really overlooked because the testing standards from the federal standards set by HUD are not strict enough. So my kid was poisoned anyway, my son Charlie, and he was also poisoned in utero. And so that was, I don't talk about that as much, but that was definitely an upset. And if I had a choice, and this goes back to ruining the dreams of a Victorian farmhouse, if I had a choice, I would never have moved into this house. Charlie would not have been poisoned. Charlie's poisoning, while he's the one who's tested positive at the lowest level of all my kids, his behavioral issues are the most significant. It's possible we missed testing him because we thought we didn't need to. We were living in a newer house. It had been renovated. And so we didn't test him until he was 2. We didn't test him when he was 1, even though I knew what I knew, even though I was advocating in the way I was advocating. I didn't test him. He was born in 2008. I did know that he was born with lead in his blood because I tested myself when I was pregnant and right after delivery, and I was a blood level 1 and then a 1.1 after delivery. And I learned that way that I learned later that Dr. Rabito had done the study showing that blood levels as low as 0.43 in women of childbearing age can cause birth complications. And I was I almost died in childbirth with him because of advanced stage preeclampsia that had gone undiagnosed. And the advanced stage preeclampsia is likely linked to lead exposure from my lead exposure with my other kiddos because I was exposed when they were exposed, but no one tested me when the kids were initially poisoned. I was a nursing mom. They should have tested me. They didn't. So I advocate for preconception testing, prenatal testing, testing with every pap smear. If you can get a blood lead test before you get pregnant, that's what you need to do. That way you know if you have any potential hazards in your home that you can address. And you want to get a test that's super sensitive, that's going to let you know, do you have a blood level 0.1 or 0.4 or 0.5? Because with impacts shown and clearly demonstrated at 0.43, you want to know, are you a 1 or less than 0.5 or what? And if you are over a 1, as an adult woman, you should address any problems in your home or move prior to getting pregnant. Let's see. I'm looking at all these questions. Hold on, I'm reading questions for a second. I just got a really long question in a message. Let's see. Next question. I don't know if that answers your question. I wish I didn't live in an old Victorian house. I guess that's the end, Meredith, of that. I really wish that I lived in a new construction house. When we bought this house, our intention was to tear it down. And we were going to sell other property we had and build a new unit here. But then the market tanked and we were never able to tear this down and build a new unit. Katie Ellis said, have you found any good strollers? My daughter spends a lot of time in our Bob jogging stroller a lot while I tend to the garden, and I've been worried about it. And how many people would we need to get you to come to Atlanta on your tour? Strollers I have no concern with. If you have a new stroller, I have no concern. I do have concern with used strollers, not because of manufacturing issues that might have lead. I have concern with used strollers because you don't know where it's been. If it's been in someone's driveway and they did a work on their home, or I have seen so many strollers, especially like in New York City and high density areas, where people put the stroller underneath the stairs of the apartment building as they come in the door, and then there's all this lead paint right over it, and they don't realize that they're putting their stroller or storing their stroller in a highly lead painted area. Or it's mostly under the stairs. People store their stroller under the stairs in their house. Oh wait, can I have that? My son's interrupting me. I want that. I don't give that to me. I wanted to show my friends. No, you can't use that. Go away. um, Interacting with my 15-year-old. So I don't like the idea of you getting a used stroller because you might end up getting a contaminated stroller, and that's the kind of thing that's really hard to clean. After my kids were poisoned, we ended up throwing out all our strollers because it was just too hard to clean safely, and it's so cheap from a new one. Heather says hello from Pennsylvania. Oh, coming to Atlanta. I'd love to come to Atlanta. I came to Atlanta in 2016 in May. That I was there I did some events with the EPA there. I did a speaking engagement, and I talked to the local program people there, and they said they'd love to have me come back. So I could even maybe coordinate a public event in Atlanta. On this trip, we're going to go the northern route across the country because we're dropping my son off at school in Boston, and then we're going to probably come home the southern route, which would be September, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. I haven't figured out how many people I can safely see doing social distance presentations and, events. And so I'm working on trying to figure that out in the next couple of days. And actually, I'm confirming people now for this cross-country tour because the idea is that having sponsored events or one-on-one consultations with families over the course of this cross-country tour will help cover the cost of the tour. It's not going to be a big money-making thing, but I need to be able to cover the cost to be able to do it. And our hope is that we're doing this to prevent having to put my son on an airplane to send him to college, which is another scenario. And there's a chance I might not come back to Oregon anytime soon. I might stay on the East Coast for a while. So in which case Atlanta's not that far from Boston, right? Relatively. Okay, let's see. And then Meredith said, I didn't even think of it in birth. Yeah, in the birth complications. I have a whole post about that. And it's just, it's significant. And so you really want to make sure that before you get pregnant, if you can, that you are negative for lead to the lowest possible level of detection with a tight margin of error if you can get that testing done. Heather Sorensen said, my daughter had a level 5 in February. I found the exposure and removed it, retested in March, and she had a 3. Just retested 2 weeks ago, and she's still at 3. She'll be tested again in October, wondering why it went down so fast from 5 to 3. But, sorry, can't read this, but now we're stuck at 3. It's kind of disheartening to hear that she's still a 3. The doctor said it's normal, but I'm just not happy with a 3. Well, doctors are idiots. Sorry, it's in my film. I have doctors. I had one of the top doctors in the lead poisoning prevention arena. I said, who's falling between the cracks in this scenario? Why are so many kids being poisoned? Who's falling between the cracks? And his response, and this is in the film if you haven't seen it, is the pediatricians are falling between the cracks because pediatricians aren't educating themselves about the issue. They're giving their clients poor information. It's very, very frustrating. So your child, there's a 30 to 45 day half-life of lead in the blood. So if your child was a 5 in February, 30 to 45 days later, so say we're talking about February 1, by March 15th, that kiddo should be down to a 2.5, and then a month later they should be down, or 45 days later they should be down to a 1.25. Unfortunately, it's not as cut and dry in the real world. It's hard to know whether or not your kiddo does have a continuing source of exposure unless you've done extensive testing of the home. And usually you have to test, clean up, and then retest, and that can cost thousands of dollars. So I don't know, I don't recall your story exactly in terms of you remove the exposure source, but a lot of times you think you removed the exposure source and you didn't. But even at the low levels, if you look online, I have a blog post that shows Avi's blood levels. And once he hit, below 5, it was really hard to get him below that, even though we moved to a new construction house We moved to a new construction townhouse for a while, and his level still wasn't going down quickly. So I think at the lower levels, the body is not eliminating the lead as quickly, or it's not absorbing it into the bones as quickly. But as Dr. Lanford said, as adults, we have 90% of the lead that has been in our body has been absorbed into our bones. So we really aren't eliminating much of that anyway. It's being absorbed. So when I see a kid with a persistent level, even if it's a persistent level 3, I do get concerned that there's an ongoing source of exposure that the family may have missed. Heather, we can message about that more. But I mean, I would look around your home. I would do dust wipe samples. I would check on unexpected sources. It's rare that children are poisoned by dishes and things like that, but double check your dishes. Mostly jewelry. Like I find hold on, I'm gonna be doing some reporting on some jewelry, but this is a really good example. I don't know if you can see this. See the little spacer beads? This is a lead-free piece, but it's a good example of what I mean by the spacer beads. In jewelry, these little spacer beads are often leaded. And so you have a bracelet that might test negative, even when someone using an XRF who doesn't know what they're doing is testing it. But if you test the spacer bead, it's like often 100% lead. And if a child is, sucking on something like that, they can be poisoned, and it can be persistent, and it can be low level if it's mama's bracelet. So that's little things like that to look for in your home. And in terms of the doctor who said it was normal, there's an article on my blog that I did not write. It says my favorite article ever. Sorry, I'm fidgeting with my hair. I meant to brush it before I came on. So anyway, so this doctor, this journalist, sorry, lost my train of thought. This journalist wrote an article about the impact of low-level lead exposure, and that's a really good article to share with your doctor. The article's from 2007, but it's really well researched. It's really well articulated. It talks about the impact in relation to other similar impacts on children's cognitive health and related issues. So look up favorite article on my blog, and you'll find that article. It was from Rachel's Democracy and Health News. And it's one of the best researched articles I've ever read. It's got like pages of research that you can then follow through and read all of the supporting documentation that went with the article. Linda has another question. Remind me again the best test for lead levels. We did a minor renovation adding a closet a few years ago, and all the trim in our historic home has been confirmed to have lead. We hired a lead expert to come out and test it. We had blood lead tests were done for lead, but my understanding is that isn't very accurate. I'm sorry, Linda, that's a pretty packed question. I'm not sure what you're saying is not accurate. Just the blood lead testing or the home testing? The problem, and I have this post up on my blog about what to expect when the inspector comes. And the problem is when an inspector comes, they're using HUD standards. So they're telling you only if something is safe by federal standards, but not federal standards for health, federal standards that allow for federal funding to intervene and fix the problem. Those are not health-based standards at all. So basically, they're telling you, is the paint on your finish 1 milligram per centimeter squared or greater? If it's 1 milligram per centimeter squared or greater, it's considered lead paint by the federal definition, only by which that definition impacts the ability for federal funding to be allocated. So that 1 milligram per centimeter squared often, and not exactly, not always, depending on how much there is, how many layers of paint, but often translates to 5,000 parts per million or higher. And lead has been known to be toxic to children at 90 parts per million. So if you've got, it passes at less than 1 by an inspector, that's not strict enough to be protective of children's health. I seem to recall your story briefly, Linda, and I don't think you can safely live in a home where all the surfaces are covered with lead. You just can't. You can make one room safe. That's what I tell a lot of families who can't move. Like, find a room, the playroom, the bedroom, the kitchen, and that becomes the room where you spend all your time until you can make other rooms safe. Kids can sleep in their bedroom as long as they're not playing there. If there's hazards there, you also have to keep on top of the dust and keep wet wiping things. It's just not a sustainable activity to have to keep on top of lead hazards through cleaning. It doesn't work. We mentioned this in my film. They did studies about this in the 1990s showing it didn't work. You can't clean a house to a level that protects your children if you live in a house with lead hazards. It's just not possible because we're talking about microdust. So when you look at the microdust scenario, please read the sugar packet blog post. 1 sugar packet worth of lead dust, this tiny little amount, spread evenly across a football field is enough to contaminate a football field to about 39 micrograms of lead dust per square foot. Well, the previous standard for floors to be considered toxic is 40 micrograms per square foot, and the new standard and recommended standard is 10 micrograms per square foot, and that's based on what's considered achievable. But the scientific recommendation has been that floors should be below 5 micrograms per square foot. So 1 sugar packet across an entire football field is enough dust to, if it was spread evenly, to create a hazard of 39 micrograms, like 39.8. So you can't see this. This is not a visible, it's a completely invisible threat. And that's why it's really dangerous to live in a home with lead paint hazards, where you might get complacent about cleaning or not, addressing things continually because you get exhausted. This is like a level of exhaustion. You can't keep that up. And that's why it's, good to move out if you can, or start room by room. Make sure the kitchen's lead safe or lead free first, then go for the kids' bedroom, then the playroom, one by one. And don't let the kids be in these other rooms until every room is lead safe. Hi, Lisa. I should be posting your dishes soon. Let's see. Kylie Cole would love for you to come to Port Prairie in South Australia. We have a lead smelter here. There are many lead abatement programs, but I don't think they take into account lead paint and dishes and all the other stuff you speak about. We are low socio small town, so many secondhand and old household goods. I totally want to come to Australia. I'm coming to Australia. Like, when are they going to let Americans travel? I just need to find a sponsor. I don't know if there's a health department or a hospital that would sponsor my trip. We could show the film. We could do consumer goods testing. We would do a tour of the country. If I go to Australia, I want to go for like 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 4, maybe not come back. But I know out of the 1.9 million readers last year, 1,948,000. I think I had like 200,000 readers from Australia, and then 100,000 to 200,000 range. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that. But like a good chunk of my readers are from Australia, and so I know there's interest in the subject matter there. And I really and I love that the news there is like factual. Like there's like the news. I was all over the Australian news last year when I found lead in Tupperware. And the news stories there were not condescending or dismissive of my work or questioning the legitimacy of my methods. They were just like factual. And I just think that's excellent. I hate the American news cycle, and I can't believe what we put up with here. All right. Hi, Heather. Heather said, thank you. Let's see. Masha, is it Matia or Marsha? It's Matia. I don't know how to pronounce that. And she said, would using lead dust tests, the ones you recommend that get sent away, give us an idea of how much door frames and other areas of lead paint are dusting onto the floor below? We have a baby that is going to start crawling soon. Yes, they would. If your baby's not crawling yet, let the dust accumulate for a week or two, because it's not necessarily going to impact him in an area. Keep the baby away from that area. Let the dust from the functional use of the door or whatever accumulate, and then do a dust swipe sample. You want to get a worst case scenario. And a cool thing to do, which I should have done when I did my test on the bed that I did, was, and a friend of mine did this, I just spaced because I didn't think about doing it, but it's a really good idea. The test is designed to test 1 square foot, but instead test 2 square feet. And then when you get the result, divide it in half. And that way you're more likely to, capture lead dust in a greater area. So get one of those dust wipe sample kits from Certified Kit if you want to. And the 5-pack, I think, is the best deal. And then instead of testing 1 square foot, make sure you mark off a 2 square foot area. And do it as the worst case scenario. Do it before you clean, after dust has had a chance to accumulate. Don't do that in general. Like if you have a crawling baby, don't not clean for the sake of doing a test. But if you don't have a crawling baby yet, and you can walk around that area, just see what levels accumulate. That's good. Also, you can do a dust wipe sample under a piece of furniture if you want to get a really dusty area under a bed. That'll show you a worst case scenario of how the lead dust is accumulating in your home and how it's spreading, because it does spread. There's this crazy myth out there that a lot of lead hazard abatement people and painters quote. They say, "Oh, lead's heavy. It doesn't go very far. It's too heavy to float down in the breeze." That's total bullshit. They did a study in Washington, D.C., where they demolished a building, and they found that the lead dust particles of the demolition of that building traveled at least 3 blocks, I believe. I think possibly even farther. I don't remember the quantified, the quantities, but they did pre-demolition testing and post-demolition testing, and they saw the distance that the lead dust particles can travel. And when my home was renovated, my kids were poisoned. The lead dust particles contaminated our entire yard, 7,500 square feet, and the neighbor's yard, and across the neighbor's yard, and the strip in front of the what do you call it? The sidewalk strip between the sidewalk and the street. So yeah, use those dust wipe samples. You want to make sure you have a dust wipe result of your floors of less than 5 if you can. And don't have carpets on the floor. Carpets are dust magnets. They not only collect dust from inside your house, but if you've got lead outside, or if you have a pet that goes inside and outside, they're going to be tracking lead dust in on their paws, especially if they are outside around the garage, that sort of thing. So the carpets are evil. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. My kids love going to people's houses with carpets. They're like, "Oh, Mom, this is so nice. It's so soft and comfortable and cozy." And I'm like, "Yeah, no." So let's see. Lisa asked, I wanted to ask about vacation rental homes in general. We wanted to go to Galveston area and rent a home by the beach, but they all look old. And my mind went on overdrive and decided not to go. Will a few days in an old home, which may or may not have lead paint, be something I need to worry about? Well, that depends on your kids, how old they are. Are they crawling? Are they mouthing? How much time are you spending? I have been to a lot of Airbnbs that have massive lead hazards. And it's very concerning because I don't know if Airbnb has changed it, but I think Airbnb does not require lead paint disclosure for a short-term stay. And again, like in Denmark, we stayed in Airbnbs that had lead paint hazards all over the place, even though they were renovated. Because oftentimes the last thing to be renovated is the highest lead area, the bathroom, the kitchen, and the porches. The porches are almost always left, and exterior soil areas. So if I was going to take my kids to an Airbnb, I would look for newer construction if at all possible, or a complete renovation that was done a while ago, so there's been time for that any dust created to be cleaned up. That's one of the reasons I stay in hotels when I travel, because I have stayed in a lot of houses. I've stayed in a lot of people's basements and their other units, in-law units and stuff. People have been really generous in letting me stay at their homes, and I see lead hazards in these homes all the time. And I got to the point where I didn't feel comfortable anymore staying in old lead painted houses, so I always stay in hotels. And so that's a choice that I've made. And for me, like, you can find a hotel on Priceline for $79 a night, and it's gonna like have a free crappy breakfast, and it's a comfortable, reliable bed, and it's not gonna have bed bugs, and there's not gonna be lead paint hazards. So I think I'm just trying to think. Here in the Oregon coast, there's a lot of rentals that don't have painted surfaces. A lot of them are newer construction because they were built after storms. I mean, it depends on where you're going. And yeah, if you are renting a beach houses are especially concerning because beach houses are often painted with marine paint. That's high lead paint, regardless of the age. So paint for boats can still have high lead. It's allowed, and it's sold and can be used. It's not frequently used, but it's on residential properties, but it can be. And so in a marine environment, high marine environment, you're more likely to see lead paint on a newer construction house or housing component, like the porch in the back porch. Oh, I don't know if that scene made it to the movie. Yeah, there's a scene in the movie where the back porch of the house from New Orleans has lead paint, and the back porch is only 5 years old. And that was because they probably used some good lead paint, exterior paint meant for boats to cover the porch. So I do have concerns about that. Let's see, Linda. I was referring to the accuracy of blood lead testing for lead levels. So in terms of accuracy of blood lead testing, I have a whole post. I should do a thing where I show you guys my menu, but the menu of my blog, there's a thing that says lead testing, and there's all the different testing stuff under there. The very first one is the blood lead testing. Blood lead levels from venous draw done at a hospital are generally going to be the most accurate, but I always recommend, having had issues where I didn't get an accurate test when I thought I was going to get an accurate test, calling the hospital or clinic first, finding out what lab they send the test to, calling the lab, finding out what the low level of detection and the margin of error are for their blood lead testing before you get the test, because then you don't have to do it twice. Because you might go to the clinic and they might say, oh, well, our low level of detection is 5, and we have margin of error of 5. So you could get a negative that could be really a 10. That's rare. But usually the low level of detection is somewhere either 1, 2, or 3. And you want to make sure, ideally, you get a blood lead test that has a low level of detection of 0.1 or lower micrograms per deciliter. And you want to ask for a margin of error that's the smallest margin of error. So most of these tests have a margin of error measured in single blood level points. So they have a margin of error of 1 blood level point or 2. So in that case, like a blood level 3, if it had a margin of error of 2 blood level points, could be a 1 or a 5, and you don't know what it is. You want to get something that has a margin of error of 10%. That's the smallest margin of error I've seen, the most accurate testing. So if you have a blood level 1, it's somewhere in the range of 0.9 to 1.1, and that's what you want to know. And if you had a blood level 5, it's somewhere in the range of 4.5 to 5.5 if you have something with a margin of error of 10%. Okay, and Kylie says, yay, we love you here. Yeah, in terms of the Atlanta connection, I think the local Atlanta EPA, like the city's health department there, I might have her number and I can connect you with her. She wanted to see what kind of community interest there was, if they could fund a program or an outreach event. Again, we've got COVID-19, so everything's up in the air, but stay in touch. You're welcome. That's what, okay. I'm just reading through. So that's all the questions. Any other questions? I've been doing this now, talking for 37 minutes straight. Sorry I talk so fast. I'm happy to answer a few more questions. I think I got to all of the ones that were asked. Oh wait, somebody else asked me a question in a message. Let me just read it real quick. Excuse my squinting. I can barely see. I'm old and I need glasses, but I'm claustrophobic. Let's see. She said, hello, Tamara. Yesterday I came across something you wrote about the possibility of lead exposure in the garden. Having an organic vegetable is enough of a challenge, especially in the Northwest, with the weather being more like fall than summer, cold and rain, attacks from fungus, insects, deer. But gardening, the hope of a good crop is truly something that helps keep me sane. I have literally shed blood, sweat, and tears and money trying to perfect my garden. Somehow, with all my planning, I didn't even think about tomato cages and hardware cloth. As I write this, I'm out in my garden to remove those things because I'm pretty sure that they're not all stainless. Now I'm wondering about my soil. I have spent money and time to amend it, but don't know if I should be testing it and how to test it. Also, my husband just finished building me a new box to try the wicking system, which uses perforated drain pipe inside the box. But now I'm wondering if I should be rethinking all of that too. I get questions like this all the time. Really long question. I really appreciate that you think about all of this because it's something I think is important. If you have any information or thoughts on the use of perforated pipes in the soil, I would like to know. I've gotten rid of my chickens' metal watering containers, but still have their food in them. If I eliminate all lead sources, will they still continue to pass lead through the eggs? I know it's a lot, and if I can manage to contribute, I will. Okay, well, that's a lot, yeah. So, gardening. The eggs, they've studied, there's an article that was written in the New York Times that I was interviewed for years ago. There's several articles about lead in chicken eggs and lead in chicken flesh, actually. They use chickens as a lab rat animal, kind of, they fed a bunch of chickens lead and saw what helped them eliminate the lead. Well, the answer was garlic, and they really well studied it. They fed chickens garlic, and they were able to eliminate the lead. So I'd say augment, if you can, I don't know if you can get chickens to eat garlic, but augment your chickens feed with garlic for a couple of weeks, maybe longer, maybe a month, and then you can always get eggs tested. There used to be a company here in Portland that would test eggs. I don't know if they do that anymore. You could hard boil an egg and send it off to be tested, or send it off to be tested as a liquid. You want to know the results in parts per billion, not parts per million, and I can't do that testing. I know nothing about perforated pipes in soil. I have tested a lot of pipes, and pipes do tend to have lead contamination, even if they're steel pipes. So I would have concerns about putting something like that in my garden without testing. And you said you were in the Pacific Northwest. I'm here in Portland. I bought a whole spool of stainless steel chicken wire. I have extra if you want some. Okay, let's see. Jessica, I don't know if that answers the question, but Jessica says, my in-laws have purchased an old Victorian they plan to rehab. They said the water is currently 11 times the safe level, but I think they can run the water and place some of the pipes with lead solder. I'm horrified. I think they have a false sense of security because my father-in-law is a chemist. They watch their grandchildren, and I'm worried sick that no one seems to think if this is dangerous. I've tried sharing your video, but they don't seem concerned. We just purchased a home built in 1993. My kids love to dig in the dirt. Oh, that's another question. Are there exterior potential lead issues in a house that age? Should I get the soil tested? Okay, so there's two questions there. So Jessica's question, and my husband jokes, you guys are all named Jessica, Angela, Lindsay. There's so many Jessicas in my life. So Jessica said about the old Victorian. Now, so here's the thing. So most of my readers and friends and people in my groups are young women. I'm 50. So, most of you are like 30 to 35. Some of you are 27, 26, 25. Like my son is 24. So I feel like you're like a grandmother to your kids. But the fun thing we did with the movie was my husband, who's 62, scored the music for the movie. And so when a grandparent doesn't want to watch the whole movie, I usually have you, Jessica, tell your parents, hey, parents, my friend Tamara, whose children have brain injury and mental illness diagnosis from being lead poisoned as babies, made this really cool movie, and I'd like you to watch it. And then you tell your parents, who are probably my age or my husband's age, you tell them, or your in-laws, as it were, you say, The Who liked this movie so much that they donated the use of Behind Blue Eyes. Tom Waits liked this movie so much that he donated any music in his catalog for her to use in the movie for free, and the movie includes 5 Tom Waits songs. So if you say, listen, there are celebrities invested in this project. Noam Chomsky was interviewed for the movie. Tamara did this presentation with Bernie Sanders, and there's footage from that in the movie. I don't know what their politics are, but if you can get them on the music thing, usually the men will be convinced to watch it just because The Who and Tom Waits donated music and they think that's cool. And that usually is enough to bring them over to the other side. If that isn't, let me know. But my answer is they need to watch the movie. I have shown this movie to the EPA. I've done presentations in EPA offices where I educate EPA employees about lead hazards. I've spoken at national conferences where I educate people about the impact of lead exposure on families, and the people I'm educating are people who should know, or you'd think would know more about the issue, and they often do. But every single person who I've showed the film to, regardless of how scientific they are and what they do for a living, every person says, oh my God, I learned something new. Even if they work for the EPA, they're like, oh my God, I learned something new. Even some of the people in the movie who saw the movie said, I learned something new. And the nice thing is we try to make sure that all of the science in the movie is not presented by me, a mother of lead poisoned children, but it's all presented by scientists and doctors and experts. So if they have questions or they disagree with any of the science, all of the people quoted in the movie talking about the science behind the issue, I can get you documentation of studies they've done or research they've done or their credentials. So I think that if you can give it another pass of trying to get them to watch the film. Sorry, my son's distracting me here. So the other thing I wanted to say, definitely keep your children away from that Victorian. Make sure the family gets dust wipe samples done prior to you bringing the children there. It's just not worth it. Permanent brain damage is not worth it. My kiddo, who is right here, is an amazingly brilliant child. He's, whoa, knocking the lamp over right now. He's 15, and he'll be the first to tell you that he has issues as a result of his lead exposure that he wishes he didn't have, and there's huge struggles in his life that he wishes he didn't have, and he's doing a good job of getting through those. But you don't want to have this happen if you know better before it happens. All right, getting to we just purchased a home from 1993. What about the soil? So the 1993 question always is, hey, yay, 1993 home, Lindsay, that's terrific. I'm so happy that you have a 1993 home. I wish I had a 1993 home. The soil is usually only a problem if the home was built on an old orchard, because they used to use leaded pesticides for trees, for fruit trees. And the other concern is, if there were any previous industrial uses of that land. The other concern, something that's come up in a newer construction home with families that I've worked with, is that say a previous owner had a shed or a workshop area where they worked on cars and batteries sat, and there's a potential for contamination in the soil that way. A quick way to know would be to get a couple soil samples done. And they'll probably test negative. I don't know where you live. If you live in a city and your house was built in 1993 on the side of an old lead-painted house that burned down, your soil might be contaminated. If you live in the country and you were built on old farmland that wasn't orchard land, then it probably is fine from a lead perspective. You can go look up soil testing on my site. There's information about sending me soil samples, but there's also information about how to interpret soil test results. There's also a myth in the lead poisoning prevention community that soil is naturally 40 parts per million. That's total bullshit. I have tested soil all over the country, from all over the country, that was completely negative. Soil can be negative with augmentation and natural, plant matter and everything that is in soil. It should be negative. Soil only has lead if there was a lead exposure source. Usually, and lead at a measurable level in parts per million. And normally that's because it's in a city or, a farm that has either farm equipment or orchards, or an industrial exposure like by a battery plant or something. There is lead-free soil. The current federal standard that soil is at which soil is considered toxic is 400 parts per million. I think they're lowering that. I forget where that stands. Things have been caught up in the legislation. Dr. Howard Milkey, who's the world's top soils expert, recommends that soil should be below 100 parts per million. And he also recommends that soil should be tested in a different way, because we should test the surface of the soil, and that he created a way to do surface soil testing called plop sampling. And when he analyzed those plop samples, they came up similar to XRF testing that I did of the same soil samples that he had. So the plop sampling is a really good methodology for soil testing, but it's the same as surface testing using XRF methodology. And so he recommends 100 parts per million as a maximum, but still that's too high. I always recommend that soil samples should be below 40 parts per million. The city, the county of Los Angeles is the strictest that I know for soil, and they recommend that soil that children are going to garden in or have activities in should be below 80 parts per million. So LA County has the best standards in the world, I think, although I'm not really familiar with what soil sample limits are in terms of considering something hazardous in other countries. Next is Elizabeth. Elizabeth said, please let your audience know that the Volcano Art Prize is a fun and creative way to take action and raise awareness about lead safety. And the entry deadline is on July 27th. So this is a really fun thing. Elizabeth runs an organization called the Lead Group, but it's a different lead group. It's the Lead Action and Awareness something. I'll pull it up. I'll give you the link. And they're out of Australia, and the Volcano Art Prize basically is on the principle that the only lead on the surface of the planet prior to humans polluting the planet was from volcanoes, and even that lead is minimal compared to the amount of lead that we've added to our soil and air from industrial activities. And so she has children. Your children can participate by sending in an application. I think there's a fee waiver if you can't afford the fee, or you can pay a small fee, $5 or $10. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head, but to enter the Volcano Art Prize, and she put that as a link in her question. And it's in Australia, so your kids can enter an art contest in Australia, which is super cool. And then if they win, which I think everybody wins something, or a lot of people win something, she sends you a mug with their art printed on it, which is lovely. And I've tested the mugs and they were lead free. Yes, I tested the mugs, Elizabeth. So that's a fun thing you can do. And please consider it's a nice at-home activity given everybody's still doing the pandemic thing. And it could be a little kid drawing. My son drew a volcano and with a Dr. Seuss quote from the Lorax one year. And Avi did a painting. So any kind of art would be fine. And you just scan it or take a picture and send it in to her to enter it. And let's see. Hi, Lori. Let's see. Another question. I'm going to say Matya. I'm sorry, I don't have your name figured out. My older kid's highest level was 1.3 when crawling, and she crawled around our house before we were aware of the risks. We have adopted a lot of precautions since. I plan to remain vigilant as my second kid starts to crawl, but I'm wondering if it is at all comforting that my older kids' levels have consistently been below 1, except when crawling, or if different kids can end up with dramatically different levels at the same age in the same environment. Yes, that. Different kids can end up with dramatically different levels at the same age in the same environment. So kids' behaviors just are different. And it's all a matter of how much oral, hand to mouth, normal oral behavior they have, which varies from kid to kid. So just in terms of 1.3 as a concern or not, if you have a child in a city, your child is very likely to have a blood level in the 1.5 range, because if you're in an urban environment and there's renovation and demolition and most of that's not safe and most of that's not regulated, your kid's likely going to be exposed to some degree. So you can expect, if you live in a city, that your kid's going to be a blood level 1 or 1.5 when they're babies. If they're over the age of 4 or 5 and they're still a blood level 1.5 when their body mass is greater and they're knocked down on the floor, then I start having more concern. I used to say that a blood level less than 2 is okay. A blood level 2 or over is a problem. Well, I've revised that. I really think we all should have as close to 0 as possible. And I think if your kid has a blood level 1 and you live in a city, you're doing a good job. But anything you can do to eliminate other potential sources of exposure would be lovely. And if your kid has a blood level 1 and you live in a new construction home, I wonder, where's that lead coming from? It might be jewelry or dishes or something. That's an unexpected source. And the problem is, if your kid has the lead level 1 now, are they going to have a 5 next week or a 10? Is that on the way up or is it on the way down? And there's no way for you to know without some additional testing. So I do always recommend getting your child tested before they start to crawl. Pay attention to what they're about to crawl and then get them tested, because that's going to be their ambient air level of lead. So if they have a blood level of 0.2 and they're not crawling yet, then it's either from your breast milk, which isn't a problem, or it's from air sources. If they have a blood level of 3 or 4 or 5 and they're not crawling yet, you have a significant hazard somewhere in your home that's getting to your kiddo. And then once they start crawling, get another test right away, within 5 or 6 days of them crawling, so if you've got hazards that. And it's horrible. You're using your kid as a canary in a coal mine. It's not the way it should be done. We should all have the right to live in lead-free houses, but it's just simply not true here in America or in most places in the world. So the only way we can gauge whether or not our child has exposure is by testing them. So if you don't have a way to know for sure crawling and post crawling, I recommend getting the kid tested at 8 months, and then at a year, or eight, and then again at 18 months if possible. I know some kids are late crawlers. Let's see. Next question. Lindsay says, I hope you are able to do home consultation in Oregon soon. Yes, hopefully I will. What I need to do is have instruments that are registered in the state and local, and file that with the state. So I'm almost, I can't remember where I'm at. I got some really nice contributions and help towards the registration fee. I'm trying to raise a total of about $2,500 to assume these instruments and register them and officially own these two instruments. The problem is they may need to be serviced, and we're looking into that now, and the servicing might be expensive. So if that comes together, that could come together soon. I think that we've raised about $500 from contributions from all of you, and any other contributions. Today would be an excellent day to contribute. I might end up registering the instruments and then dealing with the ownership part of it later, so that I could have them, even though I haven't officially paid the money I need to own them, and then I can start having them assessed. Hi, Stacy. You're welcome. Stacy said, thanks for answering questions. I love it because, I've met so many of you in person. I know most of you, a lot of you don't know me, but I've had so much fun meeting people in person when I travel across the country and helping them. And I think that's the way that this work has to happen, is mom to mom, answering questions, coaching, helping, and then you all take this information and tell your communities. And, I think what we're doing is we're building a movement here. It's overdue by many, many decades. And we're trying to use social media as a tool to really make a difference with that. Let's see. Elizabeth said the LED groups, thank you. I didn't have it in front of me, Elizabeth. The LED group stands for Lead Education and Abatement Design Group. That's her Australian group. It's the LEAD group, which is different than the LED PB group, which is my Facebook group. And we're still considering a new name for this group, for the Facebook group. And she said she charges $10 for adults to enter the competition. It's a bit of a fundraiser for her, but I think it also more is an opportunity for people to show their support of her organization, because then she can report in her grant applications and such. Look at all these different people that participated. So if we can get people to participate in the Volcano Art Prize, then your kids are getting a glimpse at lead poisoning prevention, advocacy, and awareness, and how art can make a difference, and different ways they can express themselves. It can be a photo, it can be a video, or whatever. And then she said the lead group recommends 30 parts per million maximum lead in soil for chickens and digging dogs and pika kids. So that's Elizabeth's recommendation in Australia, is 30 parts per million. Thank you for chiming in. It must be like some weird time there, midnight or something, or 1 a.m. Another question from Matya. Okay, you have to write the phonetics of your name so I know how to pronounce it. Is it Matya? Say
it's yes 14
no.
hours.
Anyway, so Matya said, are you aware of any good at-home blood lead tests? We have vulnerable people in our home and would like to minimize going to labs. So now I travel everywhere, and the only place I've ever seen at-home doctoring, it should have been or used to be, is in Los Angeles. It's amazing. You can order anything at home there. They have doctors come to your home to do blood lead tests. I'd never seen that before. Matya, thank you very much, Matya. Yeah, so I don't know, where do you live, Matya? I think that that if you're in Los Angeles, definitely you can get an at-home test. The nurse comes to your home to do your test. There isn't an at-home test that you can do yourself that's accurate. There was a company that was making a swab test, kind of like the COVID-19 test, where you stick a swab and it tells you extrapolates a blood level based on your saliva level. But I don't know that was ever finalized or approved. I never heard a big splash about them announcing the availability of that product. He had donated some of those products for me to share, but they had limits and only allowable in certain states, and again, I don't know about the effectiveness or accuracy of those compared to blood lead testing. So any other questions? It's been an hour. There's 10 of you online now. This has been fun. I'm really glad that you guys all took the time to ask questions. and hopefully some other people will watch this later. But one thing I wanted to show you. So I got my Naturepedic masks, and my friend tie-dyed some Naturepedic masks for me to match my tie-dye shirt. So this shirt's 4 years old, but she did the same tie-dye job on the shirt that she did on the mask. So I gave some of these to my friends. Yay, tie-dye masks. Okay, I think I'm gonna head out now since it's 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. I'm tired. And I have a grant proposal to write. I'm gonna try and write this grant proposal that will make it possible for me to hire friends to help me in my business and help me do what I do. Hire some of you. When I do hire people, I hire moms coming back to work after having kids. I really make that a priority. And if you're interested in contributing anything, I have my chip in link under the participate tab on the top menu of my blog, where people can chip in something in support of my advocacy work. I was so excited in January and February and the beginning of March, like, oh my God, my work is finally self-sustaining. I won't have to ask for contributions ever again. This is amazing. Because with the traffic on my blog, I was earning enough in advertising income to pay for the cost of the business. And then I was starting to pay myself a salary, which was amazing. And then COVID-19 hit. So I'm back in this position of, oh shit. And so I do need support at least until something comes through. I'm like trying to sell my farm in Napa. If anybody knows anyone who wants to buy a 4.5-acre honey farm in Napa Valley in American Canyon. And my lawsuit against the state of Oregon, I'm suing the state of Oregon for multiple counts of civil rights violations against me for what they did to me over the past 4 years. That lawsuit's expected to probably take another year. It was supposed to go to the point of depositions like in August, but everything's been pushed back since the courts were closed. So I don't know if I'm going to get restitution for the hundreds of thousands of dollars I spent in legal fees and forensic accountants to prove my innocence and all of that, and when that's going to happen. So that could be a while. So until some of that comes through, I'm doing this stuff on a shoestring again. And your help and contributions are significantly, I don't know what I'm tired. I'm very welcome. Let's see. Holly said, would a Cabbage Patch hard plastic baby doll from the mid-1990s be dangerous? I've tested a few of them. Some are lead-free and some have lead. And I don't know what year they're made, like the ones I've tested. So I can't answer that question well. I believe, if I recall correctly, that the parts that had lead were the eyeballs. Usually eyeballs, painted eyeballs or glass eyeballs, they have painted ones. But usually eyeballs are a problem on older dolls, and that was consistent with those. I don't believe the skin or arms or legs tested positive, but I don't have, I have to look through my archives on that one. And as a result, if it is the eyeballs, that means it's paint. It's paint that's applied to the face. And so that's something that can deteriorate and wear over time. And I wouldn't want kiddos to be playing with that. So I wouldn't say it's dangerous. Like, it's not like if they were sucking on a leaded crystal rainbow maker, that's dangerous. But I would say I would want to make sure that a child using a Cabbage Patch Kid from the 1990s was not interacting with it in a way that they were putting it in their mouths or had a risk of it deteriorating further. My kids don't play with dolls, so I lucked out in that way. Charlie collects My Little Ponies, but he puts them on a shelf, so he's not snuggling with them. I do have concerns for kiddos who snuggle with dolls that might have toxicants, especially since they might kiss them or suck on a hand or, whatever they might do. And so that's a concern. I do have a bunch of dolls I'm going to be posting results for, antique dolls. I have some really cool antique dolls I'm going to be posting results for soon. I have so much work to get caught up on. I would show you my office here, but I'm not going to because it's piles of crap that I'm trying to organize and finish posting about. And I'm working on getting through stuff, like I said, from December and January and before, and just sharing results from my archives that I have collected over the years. So for those of you who are waiting for your results, stand by. I should be getting to posting them soon. And I'm sorry that this has taken so long. It's like the no childcare thing. The reason I'm able to do this today is my son came home yesterday from college, so he's watching his little brothers. He's been self-isolating in the woods in New York for a month, and then he flew home in all the PPE, and now he's like hanging out with his brothers, social distance, and helping take care of them. So over the next month, exactly the next, through July 30th, I'm gonna actually have time to work, and I'm really excited about that. Okay, thanks everyone. And again, I'll put the link to contribute if you can. Any contributions are welcome at this point. $5, $10, $20, whatever you can do. Also, I have applied for the SBA loan. I did it, and I was rejected, and then I just did an appeal as a woman-owned small business, and hopefully I'll get the appeal. But if anybody has any ideas for small business loans for businesses going through a hard time because of COVID-19, that would be excellent too. I'd love to borrow like $30,000 to make up for the gap and cover all the costs related to securing these instruments and rehabbing them and making sure I have tools to continue to do what I do. Thank you, Karina, and thanks all for being here. Let's see, Karina, Holly, Matya, Elizabeth, Stacy, Lindsay, Lori, Jessica, Lisa, all of you, Linda, and I'm trying to get through everyone's names, and Heather, and Kylie, and all of you who commented and asked questions. I really appreciate Katie, and Meredith, and Kimberly. Thanks for being here. And if you are interested in having me come to your community this summer, if it's safe to do so, I'm going to be starting to finalize that plan this week. So keep an eye in the post that's pinned at the top about where I'm going to be going in August. We're going to try driving cross country. Okay, see y'all. Thanks for being here. And don't forget, share my posts, because all you need to do to help me create the income to pay for the work that I do is share my posts. Because the more people who read them, the more I get paid from my advertising sponsors. I get paid like a penny per page view, and that makes a difference. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.